Robert De Niro delivers his best performance since Heat. And this is probably because he's in his 80s. He's only getting juicy roles if he's working with Marty. He doesn't get the offers for like the Leonardo DiCaprio roles or the Christian Bale roles. He doesn't get those.
He didn't get a Batman audition.
No Batman audition. The Batman, Matt Reeves did not audition Robert De Niro. So in a way, his time has passed unless he's working with Marty. Hello, movie friends, and welcome back to Raiders of the Lost Podcast, the ultimate film and TV podcast. And today, we are breaking down Martin Scorsese's epic masterpiece, Killers of the Flower Moon. Right now, I'm still processing the film. We saw it last night in IMAX. It was an earth-shattering experience. It was really wonderful. I am just blown away and in awe at the size, the scope, the magnitude of this film. It's very deep. It's very haunting. It's tragic. It's got a lot of heart to it, and it's so dense. And it's going to take me a few more watches to fully process everything that Scorsese and company put into it. But I got to say, it was nothing short of an impressive, monumental achievement of filmmaking, and I'm still in awe.
We're going to keep this spoiler-free for about like a half hour because we know not everyone's going to see it opening weekend. This is coming out the Monday after its release, so definitely you can tune in for quite a bit. We'll talk about it in depth without spoiling anything, and then we'll get into spoiler territory. We'll obviously give everybody warnings, and I feel the same way. I went into this with insane hype. I was so excited to see a Martin Scorsese film in theaters for the first time since The Irishman, since 2019. And every time you see a Scorsese picture in person for the first time on a new release, it's always almost a religious experience. The anticipation is high. He's one of our all-time favorite filmmakers. He's made some of the most loved movies in cinema history and American history. He's arguably the greatest director of all time. And he took on a project here, Killers of the Flower Moon, which is very difficult to tell this story because it's huge, it's true, it's tragic, and it's based off a book of the same name, Killers of the Flower Moon, written by a journalist. And the perspective of the book is a lot about the investigation, about the FBI, whereas Martin Scorsese, the original script, was about that, and they ended up changing the story completely, where Leonardo DiCaprio was originally going to play the character that Jesse Plemons plays, the Bureau of Investigation agent. So this is when the FBI was started by J. Edgar Hoover. This is basically their big first case. That story centered around basically what Scorsese said, a bunch of white guys investigating, whereas he wanted to change it up, focus the story on the Osage as well as the people, the conspirators, and the murderers of the situation of the Osage reign of terror that happened in Oklahoma in the 1920s. And so the film follows basically Mollie, played by Lily Gladstone, and her husband, Ernest Burkhart, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and his uncle, William Hale.
Now, DiCaprio had a major part to play in that as well because, like you said, he was originally tapped to play Tom White, the FBI investigator. However, he wasn't happy with the script, and from what I could read from an interview, he spoke with Eric Roth, wanting to try and find a new way into the film. And then speaking with Scorsese, he felt that Ernest and Mollie and their relationship would be the best entry point and the best place to tell the story from. You're telling it from the inside out and from a family's dynamic to see how it's torn apart and to see the devastating havoc wreaked upon the community from within. And it really showcased, the wolves in the den. That storyline, you wouldn't have felt that if it was just Tom White, an outsider coming into the community. And you also wouldn't have had as much ability to really showcase the culture of the indigenous community. And I think that Scorsese, for him, he must have just been so inspired from what I read. After he read the book, he just felt like he had to make this, and he actually met and spoke with Osage tribe leaders to try and get it made and have them involved. I'm guessing that after reading the story, he felt like he had to tell the story, and he had to make it as wide a story as possible. And I felt like it seemed like he had a responsibility that he put upon himself, and a whole lot of weight. And you can see that in the filmmaking because he put everything into it. And he made this movie like it was the last movie he ever made. It's epic. It's 3.5 hours, but it doesn't feel like it. It flies by. But what's really special about Scorsese, and I mean, everybody knows he's my all-time favorite filmmaker, and he's one of your favorite filmmakers. The thing that separates him from anyone else is that even at this age, and even after so many decades, he hasn't lost anything. And quite the opposite, he's actually still reinventing filmmaking. He's still adding new language to the film, to the idea of filmmaking. There are shots and imagery that I saw in this film that I was like, he's just still doing it. He's still creating he's still adding to the language of cinema. And that's something that most filmmakers rarely do, and yet he does it with almost every film of his. And that's something that was really noticeable for me in this film, of adding to the dynamic and the visual language of storytelling through cinema. There were some shots in this where I was just like, wow, he's still reinventing the wheel.
Completely agree. How does a filmmaker who's been doing it for 50 years in his early 80s, how is he still innovating in filmmaking when you can think of him he's done everything, but he's still innovating on a huge scale with the biggest movies of the year and $200 million production. That's a massive film. And Killers of the Flower Moon, it's set in the 1920s. The story looks into the brutal killings of several Osage natives who amassed considerable wealth after oil was discovered on their land, while white residents of the area were allowed to become custodians of the Osage people's money, denying them the full extent of their profits. Osage people with claims to the wealth began to die. An early incarnation of the FBI got involved, untangling a large multi-person conspiracy to steal the profits. This period of violence became known as the Reign of Terror, directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Martin Scorsese and Eric Roth. Right now, this film just came out last Thursday and Friday night. IMDb, it's an 8.6 with over 4,000 ratings. I'm sure it'll drop a little bit, but I could definitely see this being over 8.0 once it's done. 95% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. There's no audience score out yet because the film hasn't officially been released the day of filming. Again, a budget of $200 million, and the screenplay is sensational. It's an epic. It's a 3-hour and 26-minute movie. Make sure when you go see this movie, you don't drink anything for like 3 hours before the screening.
We dehydrated before.
I was so thirsty.
But then we were just sipping water.
Yeah,
but it worked fine. I didn't have to go at all.
Yes, but like we made it through Return of the King, extended
problem.
edition in person this year too. So we had some experience, but I think the screenplay, besides the performances and the directing, is just one of the great strengths to this movie. And Eric Roth, excellent adapter of novels. He's done Forrest Gump. He's done Dune, as well as other movies he's done.
Dune mentioned.
I mean, it's pretty great. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, The Insider, A Star is Born, Munich, Ali, The Good Shepherd. The guy knows how to write a screenplay.
Also Mindhunter.
Mindhunter, the TV series. But he also knows how to adapt a book. Like, how do you adapt Forrest Gump? How do you adapt Dune into these great screenplays? And Eric Roth was a great companion, I think, for Martin Scorsese to adapt this into a screenplay.
And the reason is because this movie is just all character. And the trailers make it seem like there is some action in it. There is a little bit of violence. But in terms of action, there's very little.
I mean, there's
some.
A decent amount of... It's Martin Scorsese movie.
Yeah,
you're
guess,
going to get some violence.
But it's really all character, and it's all relationships, and it's all, manipulation by a villainous man upon those around him and the victims of that man, and essentially the community as a whole.
And we don't want to spoil who the main villain is in this episode yet.
We'll get into it in a little bit. But I agree. I found the screenplay to be really strong, so perfectly done. It's really well balanced, and every character is so fleshed out. Every character feels three-dimensional. The dialogue is really sensational. Martin Scorsese was a co-writer on the screenplay as well. And you can see, like, he and Roth, they sprinkle in themes in the dialogue and things that they want to get across, and basically you could say bullet points of what the ideas of the film are, what the story are, and they sprinkle that through dialogue. I just found it to be a wonderful story, wonderful script, so well done. And then on top of that, the filmmaking is just astounding. Rodrigo Prieto is having one of the most impressive years ever for a cinematographer because of the range of his work this year, of working on Barbie and then this.
Completely different color palettes.
Not just color palettes, but styles and everything about them. He's on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. And also with this shooting mostly film, and Barbie was shot digitally. This film was actually shot mostly 35mm, but there is some digital Sony AXS R7 footage for some of the nighttime sequences. Not all the nighttime sequences, but some of the exteriors. Those are definitely shot digitally, but for the most part, most of this film was shot on 35mm with Panasonic cameras and lenses, whereas Barbie was shot completely digitally. And the lighting techniques and motivations are completely different for both films. And he's getting completely different ideas across, and yet you can see a DP who is completely exercising his director's visions. With Greta Gerwig, he perfectly executed what she had in mind, what her vision for Barbie was. And then with Killers of the Flower Moon and Martin Scorsese, he again translated exactly what's in Martin Scorsese's head. And I really loved their collaboration on Silence. It's really one of the most stunning looking films of the last 10 years. Really impressive cinematography, and also a combination of film and digital. But this film, it showcased so much range and latitude. We get a lot of really tight close-ups to feel the claustrophobia, the tensions, and the suspense of the interpersonal dynamics and relationships of the conflicts going on within the characters. But they also open up the palette to huge, breathtaking landscapes, massive overhead shots to really show the breadth of the land, the scope of the story, and in a lot of ways, the cultures and communities of the Osage and the Oklahoma residents. And so, for example, there are a couple of shots in this film we were talking about earlier. There are a couple of the best shots we've seen this year, just in this film. And that's how impressive the cinematography is. And really, Rodrigo Prieto deserves so much credit for what he did in this film. And Martin Scorsese, once again, just completely adding to his resume how he is adding to the medium. So if you can compare him to someone like Quentin Tarantino, compare the two. Tarantino is someone who sticks to the roots, and he holds on to the old school filmmaking ways, shooting on film only, shooting with more traditional style of lighting,
film dailies
watch. Exactly, yeah. Nolan too. But Tarantino really likes to approach it from the very classical aesthetic as well. He's not going to use any CGI. He's not going to try to use many modern filmmaking techniques. He likes to remain as close to the past as he can. And that's just who he is as a director and a filmmaker. Whereas Scorsese is someone who he embraces both the new and the old. For example, he used a couple of shots with an iPhone in Wolf of Wall Street. And with his last several films, he has used a combination of digital and film. He still prefers to shoot on film, but he understands that, if I'm in a very low light situation, there are digital cameras that can really get what I want without really affecting the look of the film, and we can grade it to make it feel like the rest of the shots on film. He's someone who embraces green screen. He's someone who embraces CGI. He's someone who embraces modern filmmaking techniques and bringing his genius and his brilliance to these new medium and these new elements of filmmaking. So I like to compare those two filmmakers as like stark contrast. They still get what they want. They still make masterpieces, but in different ways.
And I think it's been really great to see. My two favorite films, my two best films of the year, are essentially Westerns.
Yeah.
This and Oppenheimer. They basically, this one's for sure Martin Scorsese's first Western. You could say maybe parts of Casino kind of feel like a Western, but this is a full-blown Western. It takes place in the West. And it's a great combination and juxtaposition of the Old West combining with the turn of the 20th century, new technology. We have horses and cars racing down streets. It's really fascinating. I love movies that, blend this incredible 40-year period of technological and cultural changes. It's really fascinating to live in that environment in a film. And then Oppenheimer is a Western, and it's a scientific Western, you could say, in a lot of ways. And it's just great to see Martin Scorsese in his early 80s, been doing this for 50 years, doing something he's never done before by making a Western. And when it comes to Oscar predictions, these two movies are so hot right now. And after seeing Killers of the Flower Moon, I want to see it at least once more in theaters for sure. I still think that right now, obviously Leonardo DiCaprio is going to get nominated for Best Lead Actor. De Niro is going to get nominated potentially for Best Lead Actor. He's got quite a bit of screen time. I can see that. Lily Gladstone, I think, will win the Oscar for Best Lead Actress. Best Picture nomination, hands down. And then Shoemaker, I think, will win Best Editing. However, I think Cillian's going to win out over Leonardo DiCaprio. And I think that RDJ is going to win out for Best Supporting Actor. But I think that Lily Gladstone in editing for this film have it in the bag. But I still think that Cillian's number one.
I think that editing will go to Oppenheimer. And I totally agree. For this year so far, I have two films that are 5 out of 5s on Letterboxd for me. Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon.
What decade is this? Two Westerns.
I know, right? It's amazing. They're two R-rated, 3-hour-long epics.
I love it, man.
With no CGI or huge action sequence. It's unbelievable.
Horses and ranches.
It's like, what? Like, who could have seen this happening? And the success of them. And Killers is not going to be obviously even close to as successful as Oppenheimer is, but it is projected to hit about $300 million. Apple really doesn't care. They'll take a little bit of money, but they don't need this money to make money at the box office. It'll be nice, but they want this on their app as soon as possible. But it's projected to make $300 million, which is really great for a film like this. And just being able to give Martin Scorsese this kind of budget is really, really fantastic. I will say it's my second favorite film of the year. I'll have to see it again, but I just think that Oppenheimer, it's like the film of the decade for the next 7 years, like everything's going to be like, how is it compared to Oppenheimer? In 5 years, it's good, but it's not Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer really is that special of a film, I think, and it's going to win. It's going to get a little bit more attention and accolades. So my predictions after seeing Killers is Best Picture, Cinematography, Editing, Lead Actor for Cillian Murphy, and then Supporting Actor for RDJ, and then Director will go to Oppenheimer. And then I think that Lily Gladstone, like you said, is a shoo-in lock for Best Lead Actress. Robert De Niro, I expect them to bill him as supporting just because Leo's going to get lead. But you're right. They could bill him as lead. It happens every once in a while for sure. I do think they'll go the supporting route because he'll be more likely to win something. Like he's more likely to win a Globe maybe or an Oscar. However, I think Robert Downey Jr. also has that in the bag. But I will say, Robert De Niro delivers his best performance since Heat.
That's a bold statement. I definitely since Silver Linings Playbook. And I guess the 2000s, arguably what did he do that was as good? I mean,
not gonna lie,
he's great in Meet the Parents.
Yeah, but I mean, Robert De Niro, he's so incredible in this film. I was like, this is Bobby, man. This is the guy.
I want to pull up his early 2000s catalog right now.
Not them. It's some action movies, some crime movies, and a lot of comedies. In terms of prestige,
getting paid.
Yeah. In terms of prestige cinema, not too much. There's plenty of dramas that just didn't quite work out. He's good in a lot of his movies, and he had a great 90s. And I'm talking like, he was in 1995. And not to say that he doesn't deliver great performances. I mean, he was great in Jackie Brown in 1997. But he showed his chops on a level and an expertise that I hadn't seen since Heat. And this is probably because he's in his 80s and he doesn't get the juicy roles anymore. You know what I mean? He's only getting juicy roles if he's working with Marty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that goes into it. Like, he doesn't get the offers for like the Leonardo DiCaprio roles or the Christian Bale roles. He doesn't get those.
He didn't get a Batman audition.
No Batman audition. The Batman. Matt Reeves did not audition Robert De Niro. So in a way, his time has passed for the very juicy roles in Hollywood, unless he's working with Marty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that plays into it. You gotta take what you can.
After Heat, it was really like Ronin in 1998, which is a really good spy movie. It's awesome. He's terrific in it. Analyze This. He's actually terrific in those movies. I think he got a nomination for a Globe
he's
or something.
hilarious.
Meet the Parents. You're right. So outside of the 90s, going into the 2000s, nothing great dramatically for him. Besides working with Marty.
Yeah. But this film, he is so sensational. I wrote that he scorched the screen. And he just dominates every scene he's in, even when he's with Leo, because Leo plays Ernest he's a passive and a meek man. Like the first time I saw Ernest on screen, when he gets off the train, he's in the trailer and he's looking around. The first word that came to mind was meek, in terms of his personality, because Leo can really just just changing his face. He does this underbite. He's got his eyebrows raised up a bit.
He doesn't Judge Dredd.
Yeah, he doesn't Judge Dredd under
not
frown.
Quite, yeah, like a frown, not quite an underbite.
His teeth, I think, aren't. But you can see it in his cheeks.
Yeah.
The underbite. It's reminiscent of Brad Pitt's underbite that he did for Tree of Life, and I've seen a few other actors do that. Kind of, it changes the shape of their jaw and their face, and it can help create that frown. But Leo, he just, with these tiny minor details, he just looks like a different character. You know what I mean?
You got so much from him just from the first 5 seconds of him non-verbally.
Exactly. And I already knew who he was immediately. He was someone who wasn't confident. He's someone who felt like an outsider. He's someone who was meek, who was weak, who was passive, and who could be manipulated. And we'll see that in the course of the film. I got all of that right away from DiCaprio. And it wasn't from the trailer. It was from really watching him on screen for 30 seconds and really, okay, this is the performance. And it's just a riveting performance. But De Niro's character is the opposite in many ways, and he showcased power and dominance and incredible wit and abrasiveness and cunning, and he really showcased. He had all the qualities of a wolf. The theme of the wolf is illustrated multiple times, in contrast with the theme of the owl we see multiple times from the Osage culture. I like the idea of two animals representing different aspects of the humans in this film, but you can compare De Niro is the wolf of this movie in a lot of ways.
And Scorsese, I like how you said that this movie was told from the inside out rather than the outside in, how we were talking about the structure was changed from, the investigation being the main characters and the main plot to telling the story about the community as being the main plot line. And Scorsese calls it not a who done it, but a who didn't do it. Now, does this take away any suspense, you think? I think it really just depends on any kind of story or what kind of movie you're telling. Some people might view it as you're taking away the suspense, you're taking away the potential for these big climaxes, these big turn of events, because basically they tease sort of who's behind everything for about a half hour into the film, and then eventually you start to learn pretty quickly the plot. You learn who the conspirators are very fast. You learn who the murderers are very quickly, and you're spending the entire movie with them. And I thought that was a really interesting way to tell a story. I'd never really seen it done like that before, and I really enjoyed it, where Scorsese and Eric Roth, they're putting you in the shoes not just of the Osage and the community, but they're putting you in the shoes of the conspirators and the murderers. They're putting you in the shoes of them to give you that perspective of, like, what if you were this kind of person? Like, what it was really like to do this to these kinds of people, do it to the Osage. So I thought it was a really fascinating way to tell the story, and doing it so soon, too.
I think it works so much better than the approach of the novel, because it's because of the approach that the white men took to taking this from the Osage. And basically, so there are two ways they did it. So first, they would become, they would label Osage members as incompetent and be their guardians, be their legal guardians, be basically in charge of their money.
We'll get to that, the legality of that in a little bit.
But that was a commonality in the community. So Lily Gladstone's character, Mollie, she's one of these people who she has been labeled legally incompetent. So she can't spend money without asking for it and providing good reasons to use her money. Even though it's her money, even though it's her family's money, she's not allowed to legally use her money without permission. So she's incompetent. That's one way that the white people controlled the Osage. The other way is basically the whole overarching scheme of marry an Osage woman and then slowly kill them and then take their endowment, their estate, so that it comes to you. The wealth comes to you, the property comes to you, the oil comes to you. So that was basically the plan for many of these men, and how they took advantage and killed and stole from the Osage community, is to marry and then kill them in a way.
Unfortunately, this is not the only story of the Osage community. They are still a very flourishing and thriving community, but this is a horrific, tragic decade in their community's life. So, of course, this has to be talked about. It's a story that has to be told. There was a movie made in 1926 called The Tragedies of the Osage Hills, or something like that. And so it was told the story of these murders, the Osage murders. And it was really just has been a footnote in history ever since, until that book came out in 2017, right? And obviously Martin Scorsese read it, and he's been attached to make it since he was in production for The Irishman back in 2017 and 2018. And I think it's a really important story to tell because it's so relevant to things that are happening today, and a great metaphor, like how we're talking about just coming from the inside of a community and tearing it apart and taking everything from it. It's basically a small metaphor for colonization in a lot of ways. And I want to talk about the Reign of Terror and the Osage Nation for a little bit, if that's cool with you.
It's cool with me.
So the Reign of Terror is basically a name for what happened, and it lasted from 1921 to 1926 after oil was discovered below the reservation of the Osage in 1897. Some tribal members became among the richest people in America, since each Osage had been granted 657 acres of land. As Grant wrote in the book, in 1923 alone, the tribe took in more than $30 million, the equivalent today of more than $400 million. The Osage were considered the wealthiest people per capita on the planet Earth. Now, the Osage Nation were heavily involved in the film and story, according to Jim Gray, the tribe's former principal chief and the great-grandson of Henry Roan, who was one of the characters in the film, whose 1923 murder is central to the plot. He said the film bursts with Osage culture. You feel like you watched an Osage film, Gray says. He and several other descendants of the Osage people portrayed in the film were flown to New York City earlier this year for a private screening. He said the white savior narrative isn't really there, and it's been replaced largely by the Osage. Now, for a little background on the Osage, for thousands of years, dating back to 700 BC, the Osage Nation resided on a vast stretch of territory that extended from the Ohio River across the Mississippi and into Oklahoma, across southern Kansas. In the 19th century, however, as white settlers encroached on their territory and anti-indigenous sentiment flourished, the U.S. government began a series of forced relocations, resettling the Osage repeatedly until finally, by the 1870s, the government forced the Osage to relocate to northern Oklahoma. The government had intentionally resettled the Osage to some of the worst farmland in Oklahoma. Nothing would grow, reminiscent to There Will Be Blood, obviously, only to accidentally relocate them to the richest oil deposit in the country. In the late 1890s, the oil reserves were discovered, and the Osage people suddenly came into possession of confounding amounts of wealth, abruptly becoming the richest community on the planet. So, the oil discovery, which happened in the 1890s, led to the Osage tribe receiving a 10% royalty on the sales of petroleum produced on the reservation. Through the efforts of Principal Chief James Bighart, in 1907, they reached a deal which enabled them to retain communal mineral rights on the reservation lands. These were later found to have large quantities of crude oil, and tribal members benefited from royalty revenues of oil development and production. The government leased lands on their behalf for oil development. The company's government sent the Osage members royalties that by the 1920s had dramatically increased their wealth, like we were talking about earlier. Now, in 2000, the Osage sued the government over its management of the trust assets, alleging that it had failed to pay the tribal members appropriate royalties. It had not historically protected the land assets and appreciation. The suit was settled in 2011 for $380 million. Now, I want to talk about the guardianship that Anthony brought up a little earlier, as well as the murders. So when the Osage eventually got their immense wealth and they were spending it, the U.S. government was alarmed by the way the Osage were using their wealth. So in 1921, the U.S. Congress passed a law requiring any Osage of half or more Indian ancestry to be appointed a guardian until proving competency. Minors with less than half Osage ancestry were required to have guardians appointed even if their parents were living. So even their parents couldn't be their guardians, which is wild. This system was not administered by federal courts. Rather, local courts appointed guardians from among the white attorneys and businessmen. By law, the guardians provided a $4,000 annual allowance to their charges, but initially the government required little record keeping of how they invested the difference. Royalties to persons holding Osage head rights were much higher, $11,000 to $12,000 per year during the period of 1922 to 1925. Guardians were permitted to collect $200 to $1,000 per year, and the attorney involvement collected $200 per year, which was withdrawn from each Osage income. So the lawyers and doctors and everyone were paying themselves hundreds of and thousands of dollars every year off the estates that they were telling them that they couldn't control themselves. Some attorneys even collected over $4,000 a year. And so the guardianship program created an incentive for corruption, and many Osage were legally deprived of their land, head rights, and or royalties. Others were murdered in cases the police generally failed to investigate. The coroner's office colluded by falsifying death certificates, for instance, claiming suicides when people had been poisoned, and would not allow for autopsy results to be revealed.
And the Osage tribe dates back a very long time ago. So, as we learn in the opening of the film, Ernest, reading through the history of the Osage, says that he informs the audience that they're not part of the 5 civilized tribes. So the 5 civilized tribes in North America were the Cherokee, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole nations, and these were the larger indigenous tribes that had larger economic resources and were basically seen as kind of like states in a way. And so Osage weren't that large. However, they do date back to 700 BC. The tribe was developed in the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys at 700 BC.
Yeah, I said all this, pal.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're good, dude. He clearly wasn't listening, everybody.
Well, I mean, you were reading.
It's the first thing I said.
Damn. I thought I had something cool.
I
thought I had some cool info.
When you think you're paying attention in English class.
So yeah, 5 civilized tribes. Yeah,
that I didn't say though.
Yeah, that. Also, this film had an excellent production crew outside of Rodrigo Prieto. We had Jack Fisk as a production designer.
Legend.
He's got to be like the best PD there is. I mean, he's worked with Paul Thomas Anderson on There Will Be Blood and a couple of his other films. He's worked on Tree of Life, The Revenant with Iñárritu, Mulholland Drive with David Lynch. I mean, the guy's filmography is absolutely unbelievable. There's a reason why some of the greatest directors working today constantly hire him. It was great to see him on this large scale. Also, costume designer Jacqueline West. She previously did Dune.
Dune reference.
Number 2, The Revenant. She also did Argo Fuck Yourself and The Social Network. So we get.
I love how we just say Argo Fuck Yourself when we talk about Argo. We never just say Argo.
And the production and the costuming are absolutely fantastic. I expect this. It's going to be tough competition between Barbie and this film for costume design. However, I think that this is going to win. Barbie's great and everything. I just think that this film, the portrayal of the culture, the portrayal of the community, I felt like I was watching true intimate moments just being filmed by a camera. And Marty opening the film with the ritual funeral, really incredible shot. He opens with an out of focus frame and then the hands holding that blade come into frame in focus. And
it's a pipe.
Thank you.
And actually, it's not exactly a funeral. In a way, it's a funeral, but they're mourning how their children will now be taught by white people.
Gotcha.
And they won't fully be Osage anymore.
Yeah. And it's just a really incredible opening because I think any other filmmaker, they would have opened this film with Tom White driving to Oklahoma.
I guarantee that the original script, I bet J. Edgar Hoover was a character.
Maybe, yeah.
The FBI was the opening was probably
my God,
FBI.
You're right.
That's why Martin didn't want to do it that way, because he didn't want to make a movie about a bunch of white people investigating all these white guys.
That's a great point. That absolutely would have happened with so many other filmmakers.
Imagine the first act is about getting to Oklahoma and discovering everything, you know?
And making it the first thing we see is a 4-minute scene of an intimate moment like that within the community.
I guess we're getting to spoiler territory now.
I mean, we're 20 minutes
in. I know. Yeah,
let's go.
Just let you all know we're gonna start talking about it in depth. So if you haven't seen it, go watch the movie in IMAX if you can. If Dolby, it sounds incredible.
And if you haven't seen it, keep the episode playing, but put it on
mute.
So
just if you want, but when you go to bed, just hit play on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube and all your devices.
It'll be fine.
Yeah,
Get us the analytics.
Yeah, get the ad plays.
Everybody wins.
Anthony needs to afford Trader Joe's this week. But yeah, we're getting to spoiler territory.
I thought it was just so brilliant to open with the tribe and members of the tribe, because we're at the opening of the film. We're seeing already the conflict. We're already seeing the loss. We're already seeing what's at stake, and we're seeing the community, and that's what really connects us. And so when the outsiders come in, Ernest being the outsider, it's not really his story. It didn't open with him. He's the first white character we see, really, but in terms of the story, he's 6 minutes in, because it opens with the Osage ritual, and then we get the old-timey footage of the Osage and their wealth.
No, before that, so it opens with the funeral.
Yes,
the ritual of mourning the loss of the Osage ways, and then the discovery of oil, and the oil dance, and then the newsreels of how the Osage spending their money are becoming westernized because they're so filthy rich, wearing Western outfits and driving cars and Western technology, Western homes. So that newsreel leads into Ernest on the train. Great black and white to color film transition. But basically we get like a mini movie, just 6-minute short film, you could say, of how the Osage ways have changed because of their wealth and the white men.
Yeah, and I thought there's no narration. It's just footage and editing. It's just the bare bones of filmmaking.
You can say text for narration.
Yeah, there's a little text, and they actually used old cameras. And there's some behind the scenes photos of Martin Scorsese and Rodrigo Prieto using like very old film cameras, and that's why the film is actually shaking, because those old cameras, they couldn't remain steady and they shook a little bit when they filmed, and also the old lenses reminiscent of the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. A lot of those old lenses where the focal length is very, very shallow, and also it can't capture the entire image in focus, and you get these blurred areas of the frame. Really just puts you into that world. And then, like you said, that transition, what they do is they do a take in the train compartment. We're pushing forward with the old-timey black and white films footage, and then it's slowly becoming cleaner and more saturated, and then we finish on Ernest fully in color with the modern camera. And we're basically, the whole point of that is like, memories are captured with film, and now we were watching the film reels, just basically photographs of this time, and now we've entered that world. And that's how I saw that show. I thought it was so brilliant. I was like, we're entering this memory.
It's really similar actually to how Affleck opens his movies with getting you a feel of either the mood or the time period with the 80s with Air, or in Boston with just B-roll of the community, where we get a sense of this era, of this world. And I think that the photography of using those old cameras, like you said with Assassination of Jesse James, it adds so much, because getting shots of the photos they've taken with these old cameras, you don't see images like that very often, just in movies, or maybe if you go to an old Pavilion store or something like that, you'll see these old Western photos from these old-ass cameras in the 1920s and 1930s. And there's something about those cameras that really transport you when you see images like that in a film. Just like
the
when
lithograph photographs,
just
too,
like when you go over like your grandparents' house, your family's, your older relatives' houses, and you see these old photos on their framed on the walls, and you really just stare at them, and you're just transported into a different era.
Yeah, because we get the lithograph photographs and also the steel photographs, and Marty and team would do a shot of the whole photograph, but then they would do a close-up frame of like just a close-up on Molly, or just a close-up on another member of the family like Minnie. And we're getting like a sense for, like you said, when we look at photographs, well, when we used to look at photographs, you would like go up in there and try and look at see the person's face better, and just you're trying to when you look at an old photograph, you're like imagining what that world was like.
Yeah,
and he's capturing that in the
We've
film.
always had different eras of photography for like the common person, like the 90s with Polaroids, and then the 2000s with disposable cameras. Like you can tell the era just from the type
in the
of
point
film.
and shoots.
Yeah.
And now we have the iPhone cameras.
Now we don't have photos anymore. We just have digital images,
galleries.
Digital images.
Wait, image galleries? Tell that to a person from the 20s. What?
Yeah, I got 7,000 images on my phone, and half of them are of my cat. So I think that just adds so much quality to it. And it's really interesting how important music is to this film. I mean, Robbie Robertson created an incredible score, and I mean, the bass undertones in this entire film just adds so much to the movie. It feels like a character, plus this musical legacy in the film. And Robbie Robertson just passed away in August 2023, just a month ago. So the end credits had in memory of Robbie Robertson, for Robbie Robertson, which is really tragic. He actually himself is of First Nation ancestry. And, the music he described as old-timey, bluesy, and percussive. Also features popular music from the 1920s and to Native American songs. And this was Robertson's final completed film score. However, there's even more of a musical legacy to this movie. Martin Scorsese cast several musicians in this movie that aren't actors. Jack White has a cameo at the end. He plays one of the radio actors on this great presentation of the Osage murders on stage, and that was radio broadcast, which was terrific. But a bunch of these actors in huge roles, they're actually just musicians. They're all alternative rock musicians. They're country musicians and blues musicians. So Jason Isbell, he plays Bill Smith. He's the one who Bill and Ernest don't like each other, and eventually Bill and Anna get blown up in the house in the explosion. Or is it Rita? Rita gets blown up. And so Jason Isbell, he's a country blues singer and guitarist.
Wow.
And he's not really an actor. He's been in some things here and there. And then Sturgill Simpson, he plays Henry Grammer. He's the rodeo star and moonshiner who helps get them the hookup with A.C. Kirby, the explosives robber expert. He's Pete Yorn, another bluesy country rock star and rock musician. And then Charlie Musselwhite as Alvin Reynolds. He's the man at the end, the older man at the table who saw Byron with Annie and tells Jesse Plemons' character, what's his name? Tom White. Tom White tells Tom, "Oh yeah, I saw Byron with Tom Wright. They rolled up over there. That's the guy sitting at the table by himself drinking whiskey. That's Charlie Musselwhite." So 4 well-known alt-country blues musicians and singers playing characters, and they're not really actors at all. Then obviously Jack White, he's been in plenty of movies. He's just such a busy musician that he doesn't act that often, but he's always great. I mean, he's really good in Cold Mountain. But I
and in Dewey Cox.
Yes, he's terrific. He's Elvis.
Easy there. What y'all know?
Oh, chop your head off. So why would Marty cast so many musicians as characters in his movie? And I think that for Marty, he's had such close ties to rock and roll music and blues music and country music his entire career. How many documentaries has he made with the Rolling Stones and other great musicians? So music is something that's near and dear to Marty. He's obviously the best when it comes to selecting music for movies. He probably has an insane knowledge for rock and music in general. So when I found this out today, I was trying to think of why would Marty do that? And when I go back and think about the characters that these musicians were playing and their portrayals of them, I couldn't help but feel that, musicians, and I feel like country musicians, blues musicians, they exude a sort of charisma. They exude a sort of energy.
It's the vibe, bro.
It's exactly. And they have this aesthetic and something about the confidence. It's something about the blues. It just exudes out of them in an aura in a way, if that makes sense. A lot of these deep root musicians with great ties to the blues and country music and old country music. And I feel like Marty wanted to put that in his film to just bring authenticity to characters, but something's fresh because they're clearly not classically trained actors. And you can kind of tell when you're watching, but it doesn't take away from the performance. It actually enhances it for me as a viewing experience.
You could either cast an actor to try and portray this kind of personality, or you can cast someone who already has the personality and already has that vibe about them. And they don't have that many lines, but they can get across what you need. And I agree. The Coen brothers do it sometimes, and musicians have played characters in films without being actors many times before. And I'm talking musicians who don't want to be actors. I think that he was capturing the sense of this kind of a person, and they don't exist anymore. We're talking about the 1920s in Oklahoma, but there are modern people who maybe still live that kind of life. And why not capture someone who lives that life in that area and grew up with those stories? Be a more authentic performance.
Yeah,
for sure.
I don't know where they all grew up, but I mean, I feel like musicians just have a sort of swagger.
Yeah.
That maybe it might be hard for actor to try to replicate or try to create for a character. But I think there's something about musicians that Marty is just drawn to. And I think audience members and viewers and listeners are drawn to. Of course, they're talented, but there's something about them being on stage as performers. They're drawing you in as entertainers. It works. I mean, Lady Gaga in A Star Is Born, you're drawn to her. She's not a trained actor. She's terrific. But, I mean, I don't think anyone expected her to be that good. But as well as the character she created, just the talent. There's something about musicians, for me, I can feel it.
Yeah.
I think Marty feels it, and he knew that it would work for this movie.
And there's another major character, Byron, who's Ernest's brother, played by Scott Shepherd. I think he's Sam Shepard's son, because he looks just like Sam Shepard, and he has even like the same hairline.
What's his name? Scott Shepherd?
Scott Shepherd, actor. And I have him on my IMDb here. I'm like, that's got to be Scott. That's got to be Sam Shepard's son. He looks and has the same feeling and voice as Sam Shepard. Sam Shepard was a great writer, actor, and playwright and director. You see him in 1,000 things, but I found that casting by because
different last name. Different spelling.
All right. Oh, with an A for
Sam Shepard has an A. Scott Shepherd.
He looks like him, doesn't he? Anyways, Martin Scorsese can have anyone in his movie. It's not like he has no choices. He could have every A-lister imaginable in this movie. John Lithgow even had an interview where he was saying working with Scorsese was a bucket list thing for his life, and he finally was able to scratch it off. And he plays a lawyer in the third act of the film. Very small role, but he said that he would have worked the craft services table if they wanted him to.
Just to be near to Martin.
just to be on the Martin Scorsese set. That's what he said in an interview. And this is John Lithgow, like many accolades, very respected, experienced, loved actor. Martin Scorsese can have anyone in his movies that he wants. However, it's like you said, it's fascinating who he chooses for the roles, because he could have had like a super famous hot actor playing Byron. But instead
he had Austin Butler.
He could have had Austin Butler.
He had the guy who played David in The Last of Us do it instead.
Exactly. He had this guy that nobody knows because he's probably just right for the role.
Looks the part.
He just feels the part. In a way, you don't... Something that could take you out of movies like this, especially movies that are set in a much older time period, if people are too clean looking, if they're too pretty, you can tell they have a modern look.
You can tell, like, that person owns a smartphone.
Exactly. There's just that look about them. And I think someone like Scorsese understands that. It's like, you know what? I'm going to cast this guy who nobody knows because he fits the role. And I'm Martin Scorsese. The studio is not going to say no to anybody I say yes to. It's not like he's fighting tooth and nail to get someone cast. It's like, they're like, oh, who do you want for the role, Marty? Sure. I don't know who that is, but you can have him. So Martin Scorsese understands that the casting is so vital, and it's not about casting stars. And movie stars are incredibly talented, but casting the right people for the role is more important to Martin Scorsese than getting certain people in the roles.
No, I absolutely agree. You can tell some actors, they just have a modern look. We've grown up very privileged and very clean. But that's why I like They don't make them like that anymore. Like those old stars who've been smoking cigarettes since they were like 12 years old.
They got like a rough face.
Yeah. They've just been through it. They have never worn sunblock before, and you can tell. Whereas, like, I love Suspiria, Luca Guadagnino's remake of the original. And I think Dakota Johnson's great in it. However, like when I see that movie, I'm like, there's no way. Like Dakota Johnson just looks like someone who looks at smartphones. Like, she just looks like a millennial.
Whereas Jesse Plemons, big star, but he has a face that it looks weathered.
Yeah,
and it's the same thing with like Daniel Day-Lewis. They look like they've been through a lot and like
fit in any era.
Exactly. So Jesse Plemons, his face is just, it looks like he's lived out in the country for 10 years. You know what I mean? And you can't get that from an actor who doesn't have that. They can't make it happen. They just have to have that. And I think that he understands that. And also Jesse Plemons, such a fantastic actor, worked with Martin Scorsese on The Irishman. Very minor role, but obviously when you're an up-and-coming actor, even as big as Jesse Plemons, you work that small role with Scorsese on the hopes that, hey, he gives you a call again, and you get to fucking act opposite De Niro and DiCaprio in a Scorsese picture. Are you kidding me?
It's wild. And then, I mean, when we talked about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, one of the biggest things about that movie was it's the biggest pairing of actors when it comes to Leo and Brad Pitt starring together since Paul Newman and Robert Redford. You know, it's been decades since anything that big happened. And then here we go with Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. Obviously, vast differences in age, about 30-year gap right there. However, when it comes to their generations, arguably the two best of their generations, you know, Robert De Niro, arguably the best actor of all time. You can make that case.
He showed it here.
Yeah, and then Leonardo DiCaprio, arguably the best actor of his generation, the biggest movie star of the last 20 years probably. And to have them two together in so many scenes, I was so excited to see how much De Niro would be in this movie. Obviously, you watch the trailer, you know Leo's the lead. You know Lily Gladstone's the other lead, probably, co-leads. But you don't really know how much De Niro's going to be in the movie. I assumed quite a bit, but I thought it was awesome how much screen time he had in this movie. So much dialogue. He is a major player in this film, and obviously the main conspirator of the murders of the Osage. This is all his plan. William Hale, the king, this guy with this massive god complex. He's incredibly sharp, intelligent, but equally manipulative and sinister and evil. And oftentimes it's the most righteous people that have the darkest evil secrets, dispositions. Yeah. And, you know, they preach, they act out the exact opposite of what they preach. And, you know, typically like a very religious person of a character, sometimes they're the exact opposite deep down inside. And I love how they added the aspects of the Freemasons, and I thought that was really interesting touch to add here. But also William Hale, king, calls himself the king. De Niro was 80 years old when he acted in the movie, when they filmed it, and William Hale was actually only 45 years old when the Osage murders began in 1921.
And also, like, I remember, because the book has photographs. In the photographs of William Hale, he just seemed like an unassuming, just like soft-featured man. And it's like one of those, like, you can't believe that's the monster behind it all.
And I honestly, Ernest Burkhart in these photos, he looks a lot more sinister and evil, but yes. I think as the lead character of the movie, they softened him up and made him a little more empathetic for the audience.
Because the thing is, and also we wouldn't have gotten that much William Hale if they had done the investigative route for the approach of the film. And really, Ernest and his marriage to Mollie are the heart of the film and the hinge of the film. It all spreads from that. And using Ernest as the way in, it worked in so many ways because he's an example of someone who carried out these heinous acts. He married Mollie. It's such a complex character. It's the most layered character and most interesting character DiCaprio's ever played. We're talking about a man who married for love and yet is killing his wife's family out of money. What? It's so crazy.
And out of fear of his uncle.
Exactly.
But also Ernest, he's interesting because he goes from naivety to accomplice. You know, he's not an intelligent man. He can't read very well. I don't read good. You know, Ernest isn't an educated man.
You can read, right?
But he's very naive and moldable.
And another example is he went to the army, but he was just a cook.
Exactly.
Like, even the army couldn't do anything with him.
He's got no good traits. He has no skills. He's nothing but failures, really.
But he has a good face.
He's got a good face. He does. And a good heart. You can tell he was a decent man, the character. In real life, who knows what he was really like. He's probably a terrible person, just acting the whole time. But the character they created, you can tell he was a decent person, had a good heart, which is why Mollie fell in love with him, because Mollie is a good judge of character. And ironically, the Osage and the Osage women, they all know, Mollie says they all want money, but he wants to settle down, it looks like. So maybe I'll settle down with him. And William Hale, he realizes that he can easily manipulate Ernest. And within their first night together, when Ernest comes home from the war, he starts bringing up the Osage woman and what you like your woman, you like your money, and putting in those little nuggets of like, you just got to marry somebody, basically.
Suggestions.
In the plans.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to push it in the right direction, like getting Ernest the job, driving Mollie around and being a chauffeur, and knowing that he's got a good face, he's got a good heart. Mollie will probably fall for this guy because obviously it's slim pickings here. There's not a huge population in Fairfax. But then the thing with Ernest is his uncle tells him the plan early on. He tells him very early what the plan is, but because he's naive and gullible, but also he's afraid of his uncle, he goes along with it until he becomes a participating accomplice in it. And he does, save his wife to an extent. He's poisoning her, but not to the point to kill her. So he's afraid of his uncle, but also doesn't want to lose his wife. It's a terrible thing he's done. He's an accomplice to so many murders and destroying this community and destroying his wife's family and killing his wife's family. But he didn't kill her, kept her alive, although I think there was a chance where she was going to accept him back if he admitted the full truth of what he was putting in the syringe. He's, after he testifies, he says to her, my soul is cleansed. I'm clear. And she said, you told all your truths. I have. I'm clean. What were you giving me in my insulin? Just insulin. And then she gets up and walks away. I think that was a one shot for him to get her back. Even though he's participated in the murders, I think that Mollie still loves him very much and knows that it was really the uncle controlling him in a lot of ways, being a master puppeteer.
I totally agree. That's the most powerful scene of the film when she walks out of the room. I definitely think that it was the final test of telling her all of the truths, and he kept that one to her. I think that he was so ashamed of himself, and he couldn't bear to even speak it out loud what he was doing, and he couldn't tell her. It was so shameful for him. He's a man. He says to Tom White, he says, all I have is regrets. He's a man filled with regrets. Everything he's done has been a bad decision for the wrong reasons, and he's destroyed everything around him. And he's caused the deaths of members of his family. And he hasn't done it by hand, but he's hired men to kill members of his extended family. He's done evil, and he deserves his sentence. He dies in prison, life sentence in prison. That's what he deserved for what he did. He didn't deserve for Mollie to take him back, but I think Mollie is so genuinely good in heart that she would have possibly been able to overcome his faults and his sins to take him back in. But again, he showcased that he would never be fully honest with her.
There's still so much to talk about. And again, we've only seen this movie once, so we're going to do our best trying to remember everything that we want to talk about.
Yeah, we saw it last night.
Yeah. So it's still fresh in our minds, but it's a 3.5-hour movie. But we're going to take our quick break, go to our intermission, and then we'll get back to Killers of the Flower Moon. And before we continue, the very best way you can support our show, Raiders of the Lost Podcast, and to help us grow, is to share us with your family and friends. It is the #1 way for a podcast to grow in this wildly competitive environment now. But when we started, there was like no goddamn shows. There's like 7 podcasts. And now we're going up against like 18 billion podcasts. So if you can share us, that would be incredible.
There's more podcasts than people.
Yeah, there are more podcasts than people out there today. So we appreciate you if you could share us with your family and friends, as well as leaving those 5-star ratings on Spotify and Apple are great ways for us to get seen by new people on those platforms. And we love to read the 5-star written reviews out on Apple Podcasts. I'll get to one in just a minute. They're always so sweet and funny and hilarious and so many inside jokes. We love those. And also, becoming a patron at patreon.com is an incredible way to support this show. It's a subscription-based form of support to make sure that Anthony can get his Trader Joe's every week.
I need it. I need it.
We have 5 different tiers of membership. $2, $5, $10, $25, and $100. Now, every single tier gets you access to 2 weekly bonus episodes of the show. One of those is the weekly chat, which we moved exclusively to Patreon. Patreon is the only way we can do the show full time. We're so grateful for all of our patrons. All of those tiers come with awesome perks. That $10 tier gets you access to our Discord, $25 custom episode. Wherever you want us to do an episode on, we'll do it for you. All the way up the ladder to the top $100 tier. There's so many goddamn perks in that tier. I don't have time to list them off. I really don't. But they get better and better as you go up the tiers. And thank you again to all of our patrons. Sign up today at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast.
And this episode, of course, is sponsored by our great friends at movieposters.com, the #1 place to get your posters online today. Be sure to use our promo code Raiders10 at movieposters.com to get 10% off your order right now. They have a huge selection of pretty much every movie and TV show imaginable in their poster library, as well as all sorts of sizes, framing, and even backlighting for your poster needs. They have a bunch of the really stunning Killers of the Flower Moon posters in their catalog, so be sure to check those out if you want to get a Killers poster. We have these decorating our set, decorating our home, and our bedrooms. There's no better way to express your love for film than by decking your place out with a bunch of movie posters. This also makes a great gift for the movie lover in your life. So be sure to head on over to movieposters.com for all of your poster needs and use our promo code Raiders10 to get 10% off your order today.
All right, let's head into our intermission. Are we going to do superlatives first or...
Superlatives first, man.
Let's do
it.
I'm
so impressed that you said the word correctly.
Superlatives. I've always said superlatives correctly.
We'll see next time.
Superlatives.
Okay, who's the MVP of Killers of the Flower Moon?
It's tough. I mean, for me, it's between Leo and Lily. And I think I'm going to go Lily Gladstone because she really is this incredible, consistent, and stoic presence throughout the first 2/3 of the film until she's being poisoned, obviously, by her husband. But I think she's such a consistent source of strength for the audience to latch onto for the film and moral compass to be able to deal with the horrible acts that are going on between the quote-unquote protagonists, the lead character, the lead actors with Ernest and William. So I think Lily, that character of Mollie, is just the backbone of the film. So I'm giving her the MVP.
I'm giving the MVP to Martin Scorsese for putting together this huge piece of work that's so impressive and artistic, and the reverence and love for the culture and community, and putting that on the screen in an amazing way. I read an interview of the Osage leader saying that this isn't a white savior movie at all, and that it's quite the opposite. And he said that it felt like it was an Osage movie.
I feel like Anthony never listens to me when I'm speaking on the show because I said both of those things
earlier.
Dude,
you read for like 16 minutes straight. I was sleeping.
I think that everyone else was listening intently.
I was not.
You were not.
I was bored.
Wow, that's pretty messed up.
It was like sitting in class.
I gave a little history on the Osage people. I'm sorry you found that boring, Anthony.
I didn't. No, don't twist my words. Don't twist my words.
I'm sorry you found that tedious, Anthony.
That's not at all.
That's what
you know. No, it's you're boring. You can be a leech. You're boring.
You're boring.
You know that. Because this movie, it can be looked at as a white savior movie because Tom White and the FBI come in at the end, and they solve the case, they get the culprits. But they didn't. It's not like they're heroic. It took them years for people to finally get sent.
$25,000.
$25,000
at the time was what, maybe $1 million or something.
And then also Mollie had to beg the president in person with that brief encounter with the president,
Coolidge.
So it's not like it was the heroic FBI, like, oh, we gotta stop these bad guys and there's bad things. Like, they went as just like, all right, send some people over there and see what's going on 10 years later.
And I really like how I believe it was the chief at the time when Tom is, White, right? What's his name? The officer, Jesse Plemons' character, White?
Correct.
What's his first name?
Tom.
Tom White. Okay, so Tom White.
Tom. It's a T. Tom.
Tom. They're in that, some sort of business, and he's talking to the Osage. And he said, why are you even here? Did you come here because a white man got killed? Or did you come here because of all the Osage have been dying? Or did you come because we had to go to Washington, D.C. and give you $25,000, and then finally you decided to come here? I think that's a great point. That's clearly not a white savior movie because they had to give them $25,000 and beg for them for years to come.
All right. Who's the best actor of Killers of the Flower Moon?
Leonardo DiCaprio. He's operating on so many levels here. His nonverbal acting as well as his great performance as Ernest, just creating characters. He's one of the best to ever do it. And there's so many little nuances in what he's doing. And it's just one of the best physical performances he's ever done. And that's saying a lot because The Revenant was an all-time physical performance.
When he's weeping in his cell, I mean, I was tearing up, man. Oh my God. He was like really weeping. I picked Robert De Niro. I think he is the villain of the year in film, and this will go down as like an all-time villain character. He's that good, and he shocked me with how electrifying he was on screen, and he commanded the room and stole every scene he was in, I think. All right, what's the best shot of Killers of the Flower Moon?
So I think Killers of the Flower Moon has the two best shots of the year. And for me, it's the final shot of the film with the overhead camera, the crane going up into the air of the Osage doing their ritualistic dance. It's a beautiful shot. It's hypnotizing. And then the fire sequence where there's the farm is being lit on fire as well as the men working. And then we have the very long zoom shot of, what is it called? The heat above the fire that distorts the perception of vision.
I know
whatever that's called.
Yeah.
The camera looking through that at the silhouette of the men working on the land. It's incredible. I was blown away. I've never seen a shot like that in my entire life. And there's a quick shot of it in the trailer, but there's 4 shots of it at least.
They did like a minute of it.
They did a cross cut of it with a sequence with William and Ernest chatting. And my goodness, it was breathtakingly beautiful and sinister, and it connected to the themes of the conversation so well.
I also picked the final shot as the best shot. It's a great long take, and it becomes a pretty small in scale image that just rises and rises and rises, and we get to see really the true scale of the number of people that are on the field below. Also the colors of the costuming and outfits and the physical performance of everybody on the grass. It was just incredible to behold. And it showcased like the strength of the Osage, the future of the Osage.
Well, that was the present Osage.
Yeah, that was present.
So that was a present day shot.
Yeah. So
it's really cool.
Yeah, so it showcased like, the tribe wasn't killed. They're still thriving.
Stronger than ever.
It showcased the heart of the people. And I think that's what the whole point of that ending shot was.
Yeah, and I think Martin had, I don't know if the ritual calls them to be in a circle. Maybe that's a reference to the flower moon, which they talk about in the film what the flower moon means. I thought that was really interesting, but yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful shot. And the drum, it's interesting because in the trailers, the opening shot of the trailer, the doom, 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 doom,
is the final shot.
It's the final shot of the movie.
Yeah.
I was like, I was like, then when it finally popped, I'm like, oh, that's the shot from the trailer.
I was like, damn.
He held that the whole time.
And then it fades to black, but when it's fading, the green grass below fades before the people in their colorful outfits. And so for about a couple of seconds, it's mainly like it's a black image with the colorful people dancing below.
I think it's a metaphor for how they talked about in the film, the flowers, the moon-killing flowers.
Yes.
I mean, the flower-killing moon, how it seems like a god just sprinkled candy all over, the sugar candy all over the fields. So that's what it looked like to me, a representation of that.
Yeah, it's a great correlation.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, with the purple flowers.
I do this for a living.
Oh my god. Nobody cares about your opinion. What was that comment the other day? It was like
no one cares. Yeah, basically no one cares about your opinion. I make a living off of it. Well, off your opinions too. You're pretty good.
Oh, thanks, man. What's your favorite scene in the film?
Oh, it's so tough to pick a favorite scene.
You gotta, man. You gotta.
Hold on, you go first. I forgot to do the one.
My favorite scene is the final scene of the live performance of the true crime story.
Oh, that's an excellent pick.
I thought it was just a shocking way to end the film. It was so surprising. I did not see it coming. It literally came out of left field. And, it's a true crime performance where this theater company, I'm sure it's a kind of performance that was common, where people would to show up to see news stories performed.
Radio stories.
Yeah,
like radio shows.
But live in person.
Yeah, not like a news story, like a true crime. It was like a podcast.
Yeah, it was literally like a true crime podcast. And,
not much has changed.
Yeah, and it had a bunch of actors, and then it had a small symphony of several string players, and then
orchestra.
It wasn't a full orchestra. You can't call it an orchestra.
Well, symphony is like massive, isn't it?
Well, no, a symphony is a kind of piece written So symphony was the wrong word. Sorry, that's the wine talking. Musical piece. Musical whatever. It was a bunch of musicians playing violin.
It was an indie rock band. Someone was up there with a synthesizer in 1928.
It was Hoopa Steak.
Smash Mouth.
Hey now, they're an all-star.
Hey now, it's the Osage.
I'm sorry. All right, so for that... serious. It was a really stunning way to end the film, because the way I looked at the final scene is Martin Scorsese understands he's the greatest storyteller alive. He's probably the greatest storyteller who ever lived in the visual medium. He knows what he's saying to the audience is like, this happened, but now it's just a story passed on to us. And now it's just a book we read. Or for these people, it was a performance they saw on stage of actors and musicians performing the news story. And so he's relating that to the storytelling of our culture. And this was a terrible, horrible story. It happened in the 20s, but to us, we weren't there. And the film is that performance, essentially. It's the retelling of that. So that true crime live performance in the 30s, I think it was like 1927 or something was the date. That is the film for us, of the retelling of this story as a performance, so that we can understand, so we can empathize, and we can learn the facts and also learn more about ourselves in the world around us through the performance, hence the film.
And it was an opportunity for Martin to show you how personal this story was for him to tell, because he puts himself on stage for about a minute and a half, telling the outcome of what happened to Mollie and what happened to Ernest. And I think that shows you how important this story was for him to tell, and how devoted he was to being the person to make the movie for it. And I think it was really special for him to, I like how he's got like he's like Hitchcock, he puts himself in his movies here and there. He's got a little cameo in Hugo. It's very cute and here and there. But I think with this one, it was special for him to go on stage and do that, because he just looked like himself.
I got goosebumps.
And he also had a couple audio cameos. He had like 3, I think, counted,
hotel clerk,
of audio cameos of him saying, "Oh, please, like, this letter's for you," or something like that. And it was really fun to hear his voice. And because he only does that when it's something special for him.
You and I recognize his voice. I don't think anyone else did.
Because we're like the only cinephiles there. Yeah. There's a bunch of filmfluencers.
Yeah, we both like nodded, like, oh yeah, that's Marty.
We both laughed every time we heard his voice. Yeah. And then the end, like when they showed him on stage, someone was like, "Oh my God!" They're like, "Yeah, he's been in the movie already." It's okay. Now everyone's hip to it, man.
And also Jack White showing up, like, it was so cool.
Jack White,
when
man.
Jack White showed up, I was like, what? Jack White's here?
Is he like friends with Martin? I don't know. I wonder.
Marty loves blues.
Okay, yeah.
And Jack White's the best white man who plays the blues. So, of course, he's a fan of his.
Yeah, he's the most popular, probably.
That's what Chris Rock said about Jack White. He said no white man plays the blues like Jack White.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, that's his DNA. In a lot of ways, the music he plays.
He brought the blues into
his solo career specifically.
Yeah.
Specifically,
but I mean,
White Stripes essentially is the blues.
Yeah, it's rock and roll blues. It's just blues with an electric guitar.
Well, I mean, blues existed with electric guitars before Jack White.
It's blues, but like with punk. It's a punk blues. Moving on. Also, he was great. I fucking love Jack White. All right, best line of the film.
You want me to cut that out of the episode?
No, it's fine. It's okay. What's the best line, man?
BB King's like turning in his... Right now, BB King's upset with you. It's like, who's BB King?
Come on now.
He's my guy.
BB's my guy. I would have had BB!
way to transition to get out of that one.
Best line.
So... It's tough because we've only seen this movie once and there's so much dialogue.
Don't give me 16 lines.
I am not going to give you 16 lines. I'm going to give you one, but I'm just saying that I have to see the movie again. So what I'm going to say is my best line of the movie after seeing it once is when Ernest is reading the child's book of the Osage, and it's the "Do you see the wolves in this picture?" And it's a great line because it's from the trailer in one of them. And it's the end of the trailer where it's that incredible shot of all of the white people in that room. We don't know the context of that scene until you see the movie. It's Ernest going to see everyone mid-trial to be persuaded otherwise to not testify. But it's a great shot of him in his bed reading that book before he gets picked up to commit crimes. And it's a children's book, and it's, do you see the wolves in this picture? And the wolves aren't hidden. They're in plain sight, which is just like in the movie. It's a great metaphor that the wolves are there. And Martin and Eric Roth tell you right away within 20 minutes who the wolves are. And I think it's a really brilliant line to, great main motif and theme of the film.
That scene was shot really well too. It's the color palette is so pale and desaturated with all the people in that room, and it was the most desaturated sequence in the whole film. It was just sucked of color, and you felt the coldness and you felt the grimness of it.
It almost felt like a black and white shot.
Yeah, you felt like death in the room, the air of death. It was so well done. Great pick.
What was your favorite line?
My favorite line was, "Expecting a miracle to make this all go away? You know they don't happen anymore." I thought that was just a great line by William Hale to Ernest, of just constantly convincing him to take his side and manipulating him and basically trying to make him feel like he had no other option and there's no way out for him except his way.
There's a little Max Cady in De Niro's accent in this movie. A little Max Cady. I loved it. Counselor. Could you be there?
Could you be there?
Oh, what the fuck's the difference anyways? All right, what's next?
That's it for our superlatives. But now we got our
intermission, baby.
What's tell me your quote.
Movie quote competition time. You ready? Wolves don't kill unlucky deer. They kill the weak ones. You fought for your life, Jane, and now you get to walk away with it.
Fought for your life, Jane, and now you get to walk away. Can you say it again?
Wolves don't kill unlucky deer. They kill the weak ones. You fought for your life, Jane, and now you get to walk away with it.
Who the fuck is Jane in a movie?
Probably quite a few.
What movie? It's not G.I. Jane.
G.I. Jane, can't wait to see the sequel.
It's not. What's that from?
What's that from? Chris Rock. At the Oscars.
Oh my god. G.I. Jane 2. Oh my god. Have you seen the new shit about them?
Dude. They're pretty good at staying relevant.
Oh my god,
they're pretty good at staying relevant.
I don't even know what to think of Will Smith anymore, man.
I feel bad for the guy.
I don't even feel bad for him anymore, man.
Like when she said that Tupac was her soulmate, I'm like, poor Will Smith.
So I saw a meme. Someone photoshopped like Tupac's like bandana and goatee around her face and said, "Guess what? I was Tupac the whole time. I've always been Tupac."
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Yeah, I gotta send it to you later. It's so funny. I fucking cackled in my room. One of the best parts of being a podcaster.
All eyes on me.
One of the best parts of our job is we get sent so many great memes from listeners, and it's just like it's a plethora of comedy.
I mean, Jada kind of took Tupac's words to heart, like all eyes on me. It's just like, let me make Will's career about me.
All this is about me.
Will Smith's incredibly successful career, and Jada's just destroying it.
Oh man. What were we saying? Yeah, your quote. Yeah, Jade something or other.
I'll say it one more time. Wolves don't kill unlucky deer. They kill the weak ones. You fought for your life, Jane, and now you get to walk away with it. Wind River.
Oh, fuck.
Excellent film.
All right, here's my quote. People fake a lot of human interactions, but I feel like I fake them all, and I fake them very well. That's my burden, I guess.
A Dexter quote or something.
It's Dexter.
No fucking way.
It's Dexter.
What season?
I don't fucking know. It's IMDb.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Nice job.
Because I was gonna assume it wasn't Dexter because you didn't say it was a TV series. Because usually we do that.
Yeah, I mean,
fuck yeah.
Good job.
That was awesome. Good quote.
Feels like it.
All right, guess this movie release here. The Last of the Mohicans.
1994.
1992.
Fuck, that was in my head. Michael Mann, baby.
Ferrari's coming out soon. Pretty excited.
Yes, the more Michael Mann, the better. Okay. What year did Dexter start airing?
Question.
I thought so too.
Well, we were definitely in high school. I'm going to say 2005.
2009.
2009?
2009.
We weren't in high school.
We weren't. We were just like living around Boston. Man.
Holy crap. Yeah, we're just like living under bridges.
Well, you got to think about it, like after we graduated high school, we were there for 5 years before we moved here. You know?
I just thought Dexter came out sooner than that. Wow. I was in college.
2009. Great first episode.
That first season's excellent TV. The first 2 seasons of Dexter, excellent.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Surprise, motherfucker. Did you see that video, that Vine or video meme that guy made? Surprise, motherfucker. Some fries, motherfucker. Some cries, motherfucker.
I didn't see it.
I gotta send you. It's just like guy does it. He's like holding French
All the
fries.
rhymes, yeah.
Some fries, motherfucker. Disguise, motherfucker.
Oh my god, that's great.
All right, movie pop quiz time. What state is Lily Gladstone from?
I'm gonna go with.
I dropped a wire. Anthony's like, where'd that come from?
James has been spinning a wire for some reason.
I fret with things with my hands. Man.
You're not picking apart the bottle cap today.
There's no bottle caps to pick apart.
Right next to you.
Well, I gotta use it to hold the water.
She's from.
We'll give you. She was born and raised on an Indian reservation, so it might give you a hint on some states.
Nevada.
Montana. So she was born on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation in Montana, and then she later grew up outside of Seattle, Washington, and went to University of Montana for acting.
Okay, John Lithgow is the villain in what Sylvester Stallone movie?
Oh my God! Oh my! Hold on. What movie? Wait, I was thinking of the Denzel one.
Ricochet.
That's a sick movie. Remember?
It's a crazy
Dude, that's a
movie.
great movie.
We watched that when we were like 16.
If
We were
anyone's
like, "Whoa,
never
this
seen
movie-"
Ricochet, watch that ASAP. It's awesome.
Ritochet's awesome.
And he's a great villain, man.
He's fantastic, and Denzel is so fucking cool in that with the
so
mustache.
charming.
Yeah.
The underwear scenes were no, that's the other. That's the one where
Just
he's
thinking
caught.
about Denzel in his underwear.
No, he's in his underwear in this movie.
Yeah, multiple
Ricochet,
times.
yeah.
He's very exposed to this movie multiple times.
John Lithgow in a Sylvester Stallone movie, the villain. Definitely not Cobra.
I am the law. Wait, no, that's fucking that's Dredd. What's the fucking Cobra line?
Is there a memorable Cobra line?
He's got some one-liners. You're done. He just goes.
I love how he wrote that movie too. It's such a
Wrote and directed
such
it, man.
a sly movie to write. I would love to see the description of the knives in the script because they're very memorable knives. I don't know.
Cliffhanger.
Oh my God!
He's the villain of Cliffhanger.
He's the villain in Cliffhanger.
Yep.
I haven't seen that movie in a while.
It's a fun one. Okay, I got the line from Cobra. You're a disease, and I'm the cure.
There we go.
That's the line.
The man knew how to
Cobretti.
write. The man knew how to write a one line.
Marion Cobretti is his name. That fucking car is sick though.
The movie's ridiculous in the best ways possible. All right, what are we on to next? Haters of the week, unsubscribes. What do we got?
We got some unsubscribes.
Unsubscribes.
We got some good ones today. All right, ready? Dan T 1990 wrote, slightly buzzed right now.
Same.
In our Voldemort episode. When you talked about Bellatrix keeping the diary, I heard it as she'd be writing it all day instead of she'd be writing it all day.
Sorry, it's the crappy Boston enunciations.
That's not even a subscriber. It cracked me up. Then we got the White Wolf. You made a tweet about that funny meme of like a kid wearing a snake hat and asking who else is in Slytherin.
I'm a slithery little snake.
And then the White Wolf wrote, red and gold for life, unsubscribed.
You know, I always grew up wishing I would be a Gryffindor, but then I accepted my fate of being a Slytherin, and I've not turned back.
You're wearing
since.
green right now.
Wearing green and black.
Now all you wear is green now.
Well,
every
it brings
day.
out my eyes.
We do have
Mom
hazel
taught
eyes.
me that. She said wear green.
All right, John M. 5707 wrote, saw the mention of this new episode. Was confused why you said neutered, only to realize that it was my typo fuck up. Unsubscribing to myself now. So John left an unsubscribe, but he said he spelled the word neutered instead of a different word, and I read out loud neutered, and he was confused, and then he realized he typed it wrong.
Gotcha. Maybe that was his plan to get double unsubscribed.
Double unsubscribe. Nice job. All right, in our Midnight Ruin film on YouTube, Kind Dynamite 3015 wrote, made me sad. Unsubscribe. Congratulations. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
Josh Donahoe, on our Letterboxd of Midnight Ruin review, he wrote, should have been feature length. Unsubscribed. Also with a 5-star rating. Thanks,
wish.
Josh.
There's a director's cut.
Molly, Letterboxd review of Midnight Ruin. This was such a great short film. The pacing was good and kept me engaged the whole time. I love the cinematography and the music too. I will be unsubscribing if I don't see another project from Anthony and James ASAP.
They're coming.
JK777 wrote on our Midnight Ruin post on Instagram, guess you could say his day was midnight ruined. Unsubscribed.
You know, Midnight Ruin is a great title. Like that's a hook for me. When you first sent me the script, I'm like, oh, that's a good title.
I'm great with titles.
Good title, good band name for sure too.
Midnight Ruin.
Midnight Ruin.
Hello, everybody. We're Midnight Ruin.
See, it works.
Our residency is every Friday this month.
2 p.m.
Frank Balbuena next wrote in the Midnight Ruin. Timestamp 11:06. Continuity error. Unsubscribed.
Was there? I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, I have to check it out. I didn't look. I'm sure there is.
Probably.
I'm sure there is.
Honestly, I can't. There are always continuity. Martin Scorsese
possible.
movie. I saw continuity errors in Killers of
Possible.
the Flower Moon.
There's continuity errors in Coen Brothers movies.
There's continuity errors in animated movies. It's difficult, but thanks for pointing it out because it means we have to work better.
Can always be better. Look thinner.
You kidding me, Patrick? You look great. Isn't it messed up that we can quote American Psycho anytime? Just the deep tracks, not even like the fun ones, just like random things like that.
No, put it in the carton.
on a coaster.
In the carton. Oh my God. All right. What is your streaming recommendation?
Nightmare Alley is on Hulu. I recommend checking it out. It's a terrific Guillermo del Toro movie.
I gave that 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
It's an awesome film that no one saw in theaters, unfortunately.
Nobody likes it, man.
It's so good.
Amazing.
Incredible filmmaking.
I think it's possibly... It might be Guillermo's best movie, honestly.
Nah, Pan's Labyrinth, man.
I love Nightmare Alley. I love Nightmare Alley.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I mean... Man, I gotta watch it again. I think it's his best movie. My streaming recommendation. Thanks for asking, James.
Well, I figured you'd ask yourself.
Coherence. It's not available for free, but you can rent it on any streaming platform. It's a great, small budget indie science fiction film that fucking blew my mind. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. It's really fantastic, really sensational, really just mind blowing. And I was like, having an anxiety attack the entire runtime. It's not that long of a movie. It's 70 minutes long. But man, it packs a fucking punch. I loved it. Coherence.
I forgot to do my best scene, so why don't we segue back into Killers of the Flower Moon?
Oh yeah, we just like...
Even though we talked about it for an extra 15 minutes during the superlatives.
That's a good thing about the superlatives. We can keep talking about the movie.
So I'll segue into my best scene, my favorite scene in the movie. I would say it was probably the wedding between Ernest and Mollie. I thought it was really beautiful, and it really made me smile so much, and I felt so much warmth for the characters, because that's one of the most important parts of this film, is you have to feel the love between Mollie and Ernest. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Whether or not they loved each other in real life, maybe Ernest loved Mollie in real life, I don't know. It's tough to say because of how horrible and evil of deeds they committed against the Osage in this film, in this story, in real life. But in the movie, the characters they created, Mollie and Ernest love each other, and Ernest loves Mollie very, very much. And you can see that when they get married. And it's so important and integral because we have to watch Ernest go through being an accomplice to murder, an accomplice to killing his wife's family, conspirating against his wife's family. And the only way you can do that is if you know that he truly loves her and that they love each other. Otherwise, it's hard. It would be hard to watch. In a way, it'd be hard to empathize with him as a character, to accept that, all right, I'm going to watch this character for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. Or after we know that he's involved, we're going to watch him for 2 hours. The only way I can accept that is if he loves her.
It's a really difficult performance that he pulled off because he's committing atrocious acts, and yet the audience is with him. And like you said earlier, the mystery's gone. But the film is stronger for it because we're being inserted into the situations and being inserted into like the men who are doing these things. And Ernest is someone, as portrayed in the film, as deeply loved Mollie, and he even says in And when he's on trial, on the stand, they ask why'd you marry Mollie? Is because your uncle told you to marry her? He said, no, I married Mollie because I loved her and because, you know, she was in my car, and that's what happens. Like, he truly did love her, and he truly did marry her out of love. But however, I mean, he said about the course of events to kill multiple members of her family. It's such a strange take on a character. It's just the behavior, the choices of doing that, and how do you make it so that the audience doesn't hate you for the entire runtime? Leo tapped into that, and he has that innate ability and the natural talent to be able to empathize and understand and relate to them on a human level, because at the end of the day, you know, these people who did horrible things, they're humans. We're all human. And that's what the whole point of it is. It's like, even the most vicious people, they are human beings. We're all human beings. And DiCaprio taps into that and understanding, help us understand this person, help us understand what happened. What could lead to something like this? What could lead to the destruction of an entire community? What motivates that? And in a lot of ways, it's just the little things. And like we said earlier with Ernest, it was his passivity, his fear of his uncle, the influence of his uncle, not wanting to disappoint William. And in a way, it's portrayed multiple times. This kind of, even though the mixing of the families and the mixing of the blood, they say, and these marriages and these children, you do see multiple times displayed. There is a difference between how the white men view themselves and how they view the Osage. They are looking at the Osage as they are an inferior race, and we can use them to get what we want. There is that disconnect that we see many times in the film. They're not the same as us in their eyes. And the white men of this Oklahoma town look at themselves as, we are the superior race, so let's take what we want from them and use them.
And more specifically, I would say William Hale, King, you know, maybe not necessarily looking at it at race, but looking at it, he looks at the Osage, in my perspective, in historical terms. He sees that the indigenous American, the Native American, have been conquered. And that's why multiple times he justifies his actions, especially he justifies Ernest for committing his horrible acts. Their time has come. It's over. Their time's over. It's our time now.
And also, like, poisoning people, like, they're dying. Just let them die and less painfully.
Exactly. You know, diabetes afflicting their family, which is a real disease that they had. But still, I think that William Hale uses history and historical context to justify much of his actions, looking at it from that perspective of, like, they're conquered people. We might as well just take them for what they have. But also being a horribly evil person, but also tying that with not just, in a lot of ways, I guess, white supremacist movements. Like, obviously, we have sequences with the Ku Klux Klan in this film, which you have to have. It's historical fact. You know, the Ku Klux Klan was operating at this time, was a burgeoning community, unfortunately, in the South. That's why it's in there. And I mean, I'm sure
the footage of Tulsa.
Yeah, I'm sure. The race riots. I'm sure some people felt very uncomfortable seeing some of those sequences, but it's history. It's fact. You can't hide it. And hiding those facts hides history. We have to face those things face on. And I think that's why Martin Scorsese put those in the movie.
What I loved about the villain of William Hale is he is like the wolf hidden in plain sight, and he has the perfect cover. He's the most respected member of the white community to the Osage.
The King of the Hills, they call him, right?
Yeah, he speaks their language. He understands their customs. He has put in the effort and the work to connect with the Osage people. He sits in on their meetings. They have a lot of respect for him, and they have what they think is an ally and a brother, and someone within the white community upon whom they can rely on. And ultimately, it's just the perfect cover for the villain of the story to hide behind, of someone who, on the surface, seems to be your ally, but in the background, behind the scenes, behind closed doors, he's the one pulling the strings, causing all of the death and destruction within your community. And it's just such a brilliant villain of the film. And it's like we were saying earlier, just the perfect cover, the way to disguise himself of, on the surface and out in public, being virtuous and aiding the community. He builds that dance studio, and I'm sure he's funded many other.
He brings up the school,
Yeah,
the hospital, everything.
He helped in a way. He brags about helping the transition of the Osage and
bringing them
into the modern era and bringing them into the industrial era, and saying he probably is right. He probably did that, but in the all of this was a scheme.
But did that benefit the Osage?
Exactly, or did it benefit him? And he's got this perfect seat of their compliance and their friendship and their trust. He's earned their trust. He's the only. You see, Ernest learned the language obviously after marrying Mollie, but they're the only two white men who speak Osage at all in the film.
Byron does.
Okay, Byron does. But many of the other white people you don't see speak at all. But he says he speaks multiple times in that language.
Not only that, but he also at times acts as a leader of the Osage. It was one of the funerals, and I think it was Rita was in mourning, and then he acts as sort of a chieftain, a spiritual leader, leading in prayer in front of her. Not even though he's Catholic, not praying in English for Catholic from the Bible, but praying in the Osage language, probably to an Osage god for her. So taking on the role of like, I'm a spiritual leader for you and your people. Which is messed up because he's not.
It's one of the nastiest villains I've ever seen on film, honestly.
It really is. It's so well done.
Because of how he treats the Osage in public, of a nurturer, of a leader, of a friend. Like, he carries out and causes the death of a member of the Osage, and then at their funeral, he's comforting their family. It's such an evil, vile human being. I really do think that in time, this will be considered one of the great villains in film history.
I mean, even think about his relationship with Henry, he calls his best friend to Ernest. He says, that's my best friend. That's why when Henry's, he's very melancholy, he's very depressed, he's a drug user, he's an alcoholic, and he's passed out in front of the fireplace. He calls Henry my best friend, but also I have a $25,000 insurance policy on him. So he has to survive a little longer, and then we can take care of him.
He needs to live for like 2 more months.
Then we can let him kill himself, or we can take him out. He calls him his best friend. He's also got an insurance policy, planning his murder at the same time. He has no moral compass at all. He's just in it for money. That's all he cares about. And he's done the work. He's been there the character in the film has been there for his entire life, decades. He's been with the Osage, learning their ways, learning their language. He's known Mollie since she was a little kid. He's basically part of the community, but it's all a cover. It's brilliant and sinister and cunning and evil.
And he's a master manipulator. And speaking of Mollie and Henry, he uses their marriage when they were 15, the ritual Osage marriage, that he says means nothing. He tells Ernest about that marriage as a way of encouraging him to keep secrets from her. Because he knows that Ernest does have a bit of a moral compass, and he's got a moral conundrum in the film, and he knows he's doing wrong, but he's also fearful of his uncle and doesn't want to do wrong by his uncle. Because his uncle took him in, his uncle has provided him with work, his uncle basically is keeping him thriving, and so he wants to do right by his uncle. But it's tough. He's struggling at first, and a major way in is that William talks about how Mollie was previously married, and Ernest feels betrayed by that. Like, he can't believe that Mollie never mentioned it to him. And so because of that, William convinces him, like, she has her secrets and you have your secrets. That's a way in. That's a way of manipulation. That's a chess piece move. There's a bunch of moments like that where William just masterfully, carefully manipulates his nephew, and you see it throughout the course of the film. Or in the early parts of the film, it's just suggestions. It's like, oh, Mollie's a nice woman. Like, you really should consider like marrying someone like that. He's suggesting. He's not saying, hey, you should marry Mollie, but it would be nice if you did, basically. So it starts out as suggestions and ideas, and then in the latter half of the film, it's basically like orders to a soldier.
And you can assume from the fluidity of Byron's actions, and he's part of the game, that they've been through this together, them two themselves, that Byron's had all the same chess pieces played against him by William as well. So William has experience doing this with not only his family, but the men around him.
And you can tell Byron is really like a right-hand man.
Yeah.
Whereas Ernest is just a pawn. Yeah. There's a respect that William has for Byron, and Byron knows things that Ernest would never know. And Byron's really helping in a lot of ways with the overall scope of the scheme.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, because he's been in it longer.
Yeah.
It's already been done to him.
Ernest would never get in there because he's too much of a simpleton. And he makes too many mistakes.
Well, he's plotted murders,
Yeah.
but he's just a mess up.
Yeah.
You know, he plots a murder, but then he has AC steal his car and get the insurance money like an idiot and ruins everything. But you can tell, I think, the Freemason sequence where Ernest gets spanked with the wooden paddle, and like I said, the fluidity of Byron's actions it seems like he's been here before. It seems like he's been on that end of the receiving end of that paddle before, because he's, all right, here, lean forward on that. I've been here before. I've already done this before. It's your turn, basically.
And I also, going to the Osage and how much of the culture was put into it, on top of the rituals and the spirituality, the
cast,
the food, the cast, the clothing, the sets. There is also, the mythology and the legends are played into it. And first of all, we see the owl motif multiple times. So the owl is basically a premonition of a person on death's doorstep sees an owl. And we see first Mollie's mother sees the owl the day before she dies. She sees the owl just walk through the window and then fly into the room. And then Mollie sees the owl when she's in bed in horrible condition, and she hallucinates seeing the owl. And so she is fearful that she is also on death's doorstep. I found that to be really incredibly powerful and also terrifying idea of time. When I think of an owl, I think of time. I feel like that's the main idea that represents the owl represents is time. And then we also see the Mollie's mother's funeral. I mean, her death. Now, she's on her deathbed outside, and she's on she's taking her last breaths, and she's surrounded by her loved ones, and they're just, they're waiting for her to pass. But then Scorsese cuts to she's alone, and then there are 3 members of the Osage tribe in very decorative outfits, and one of them's got the paint on him, and they're standing there just basically waiting. And I found that to be so powerful. I saw that scene interpreted as those are her ancestors waiting to bring her into the next life, and they're welcoming her to the next life and leading her to the next life.
I looked at it as her mother and father.
I also thought it might have been her mother and father.
And then maybe a warrior guide to the afterlife, because it looked like he was in warrior outfit possibly. And then so I saw it as mother and father bringing their daughter to the afterlife with protection from a warrior. That's just what it looked like to me.
But I found it to be like, I don't know much about that culture, but I'm sure that through his work with the Osage and collaboration with them, I'm sure they taught him much about their cultures and their opinions of the afterlife and their rituals and what they believe, all of their beliefs. And I found elements like that. There are many others too that are inserted into the film in an amazing way that makes you feel like you're watching the culture. And it's not a story about just the white people. It's just as much a story about the Osage too.
That's why I centered on Mollie and Ernest. And it was one of the, I think, the best and most well-portrayed afterlife sequences I've ever seen in a movie because of how simple it was. It was not this overdone thing. We're in the clouds. We're flying in the air. We're going to the heavens, to the stars.
Flying in the air.
You know what I mean? We're not roaming the clouds. I'm just waking up from my deathbed, and like you said, my ancestors are just there. They're here waiting for me. They're where I am. This is my home. They're just going to take me home. I thought it was really beautiful how simple it was. Yeah, and again, Lily Gladstone, like I said in my superlatives, how I picked her for MVP. The first 2/3 of this movie, she's really sensational. She has this incredible stoic presence, like I said earlier, that really connects to the audience so well to keep us in the film dealing with these nefarious characters that are the other 2 leads of the film besides her. And she's essential, I think, to keeping the audience invested in this love, this romance. At the heart, this movie's also a romance. It's a beautiful romance film. And I think what Lily Gladstone did was terrific. She has so much depth in just some of the single words she says, some of the dialogue she says, just a one line, couple words here and there, but she adds so much pain into it, and you can feel the displacement of her people in her voice and the pain of her people and the things that have happened to her community, the loss of her family and the loved ones, the murders of the Osage the last several years. You can hear it in her voice, just these little nuances in tone and enunciation that I think was just so sophisticated for an acting performance. And she was so sensational, and she's magnetic on camera. You can't stop looking at her. She's got these big, beautiful eyes that really attract you to her on screen, and I thought she was really sensational. And of course, the character's drugged out for about a half hour going into from the second to third act, so she's a passive passenger for a bit of the plot going there forward, but it's not her fault. But the third act is really powerful when she turns down Ernest by the end of the film, and she sticks to her morals. And her morals are, from my interpretation, that she loves her husband. And for me, I think she would have accepted Ernest back into her life, according to the film, if he had admitted the full truth of poisoning her. And it seems like she knew that he kept her alive, was poisoning her to the brink of death, not quite to death, even though she did almost die. And she was rescued by the FBI agents, the BOI agents, the Bureau of Investigation agents, when they brought her to the hospital, and then she got her strength back. But I think that says a lot about her and what she believes in her faith, and how important family and community and love are to her. Even though he's done so many horrible things, she knows, kind of like you said, how much of a meek man and weak man that Ernest is, and how easily corrupted he is.
Yeah, and also Mollie is 12 years older than Ernest, although Lily Gladstone is younger than Leo, but she's under 20, so sorry. Sorry, Leo. Out of his league. She's way too old for him. You saw that in the performances. She has this wiseness to her, and then this control over herself, this control of her actions, control of her emotions, and you could feel the age difference on screen, even though they don't look that right ages. DiCaprio's performance as Ernest is immature. Not well educated, very childish in a lot of ways. And then to contrast that, Mollie is very wise, very responsible, and very stoic and controlled. And you could feel the age difference, even though they don't look the right ages for that marriage. Yeah. And Lily's she's phenomenal.
And actually, Lily was in the process of registering for a data analytics course and entering her credit card information for potentially shifting careers from acting, because it was during lockdown and she wasn't working. And I don't know if she's completely going to give up on acting, but that might be just a bit of people running with that story. But she was looking for other work outside of acting, and then she got a Gmail alert notification, which was a request for a Zoom meeting with fucking Martin Scorsese.
That's his Gmail.
And it was
fucking Martin Scorsese.
And according to Leonardo DiCaprio, there was no reading. Marty just instinctively knew Lily was the one. There was a truthfulness in her eyes that he saw even over a computer screen. I've never known Martin Scorsese to meet somebody and then immediately afterwards have this gravitational pull and instinct to say, let's not wait another minute. And I felt that watching her on screen. She has this presence, and not a lot of actors and actresses have it. Whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, this draw, this, when you're watching on screen, there can be 7 people on screen, but you're drawn to one person. And I think Lily Gladstone has that.
Yeah, I agree. And Leo has always had that. And
yeah, when they're on screen, it's like, who do I look at?
Yeah, exactly. And she also has she has a smile for much of the film, like this calming smile, especially when Ernest has been trying to court her, and then she invites him in for dinner, and they're chit-chatting, and she's got this smile, but then she changes the tone of the conversation to asking him what he's doing and what he wants, and her smile fades into more of a straight face, more of a frown, you could say. And so she was putting up a veneer of hospitality and kindness, but now you're in my home. I need to know what exactly you want and what you're doing here. I thought it was a great shift in her performance. You could really see it. And I love that scene of after dinner, and then there's that thunderstorm, and she just keeps telling him to calm down, relax, and just let the storm play out, and we just need to sit here and be quiet. And it was a really great
minimalist but powerful scene.
I'm assuming that's a great part of the Osage culture or indigenous culture where there's this massive rainstorm, so we have to pay respects to it in a way and accept it and listen to it and take a couple moments of silence to appreciate this storm, the power of nature. And I think it shows the great difference between cultures there, but also a representation of that culture and how important nature is to them. And I thought that was one of my favorite moments as well, for sure, is when she had her just like, shut the fuck up, basically. Like, we got to listen to the storm. We have to be quiet right now.
You know, I just realized there's a commonality in DiCaprio's career. He often plays terrible fathers. Revolutionary Road, and then Wolf of Wall Street, and this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not the most despicable character he's ever played. I mean, you could say Calvin Candy's worse than Ernest Burkhart, or they're comparable.
Absolutely.
He's way worse than Ernest Burkhart, but it's not the first time he's played a completely despicable character. And the thing with Ernest is your hate for him grows and grows but slowly, throughout the film, because Leo's just got that quality where like you really love the guy.
He has the naivety.
That's what it is.
Like, it's not. Sometimes you're like, he's being used.
You're like, it's not completely his fault, but then he's planning it with AC Kirby. You're like, what
he's
an
bragging,
asshole.
yeah.
But at the same time, it takes a while to get to the point where, like, I hate this guy. I hate this character, even when he's testifying, because then he goes back on his testifying. Then he goes back again on his testifying. And then he lies to his wife the last time he sees her. And, you think there's hope for Ernest, which is why, like you said, it's the most complex role he's played. And it's not an easy character. It's hard to make this character, I wouldn't say likable, but bearable to watch for 3.5 hours. It's not easy to do, to make a conspirator to mass murder likable.
Yeah, and on top of that, the movie, I mean, with all the death, it is very graphic. Scorsese does not pull any punches. He does not hold back. It's quite gruesome sometimes, and there's some very disturbing imagery, and that's the truth and reality to it. There's some sights in this film that, will make your stomach turn, but he has to show that. I think it's to show the truthfulness of the horrors. You have to see on screen what was done, and to make the audience, gasp and feel shock and horror at the sights of mutilated corpses or horrible wounds or dead bodies. And Scorsese, I think he knows how important it is to show the death. And one of the more interesting aspects of the film's portrayal of death is oftentimes as a representation for showing the dead Osage. He shows them lying in a bed, stiff and cold, pale, with their hands on their bodies, just lying in bed. Obviously, that's not how people were placed, but he's visually showing us like a representation of all the people who were taken away, and through the storytelling and the visual narrative, he's not showing them where they were dead. He's not showing them like in the woods. He's showing them, lying in bed. And I found that to be a really interesting motif, commonality that we saw many times in the film.
And there are so many great visual metaphors that I have to see it again to remember them all and write them all down and talk about them. And this will not be the first time we talk about this film. And Anthony and I are definitely going to see it again, hopefully this week. I can't wait because I can't stop thinking about it.
You don't want to see Paw Patrol?
I've already seen it. Just kidding, I have not. But there's this great scene. It's a terrific metaphor for basically, you could say, of white settlers and colonizers taking the land from the indigenous people of America, where it's a few years into Ernest and Mollie's marriage, and it's Mollie's home. Her mother's still alive, Lizzie's still alive, and she's just sleeping on this little couch. And the house is full of people.
Overrun.
There are maybe 20 people in 4 rooms, and everyone except for Mollie and her mother and her sister are white. So I saw that scene, I watched that scene, and we have generations of this white family. And to me, that's a blatant and obvious metaphor of just the taking of the land of the indigenous peoples and tribes of America and pushing them out of their lands, just pushing them out of their homes, overtaking their homes, and just generationally just moving themselves in a blatant metaphor. I thought that was really terrific.
Also, the actor from the coin toss scene in No Country for Old Men played that man.
Yeah.
He had a pretty sizable role in this movie.
I was like, that's the guy from No Country.
He played Mollie's guardian.
And also a leader of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah. I was like, the guy's good at that person.
He's got that look. He's got a very interesting
in the
look
voice. Yeah,
and quality.
It sells you on it.
You don't see people like that every day.
When you see him in the scene, you're like, okay, this seems like a guy who lives in the fucking middle of Oklahoma
In 1920s.
Yeah, you buy it.
It's just the aesthetic.
And then, I mean, a lot of great cameos. I mean, not cameos, but like roles like John Lithgow's great. Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser. Let's talk
5
about him
minutes
for a
of screen
minute.
time.
And he's terrific. He plays the lawyer for William Hale, and eventually kind of a lawyer for Ernest Burkhart, and then a defendant for William Hale against Ernest Burkhart's testifying.
He came in hot.
He came in vocally
Fiery.
loud,
Yeah.
audible. But man, Brendan brings so much energy to this role, and it's so interesting to see him in this movie because there was hype for it because he obviously just won the Oscar for The Whale, but he filmed this after he made The Whale, and then he filmed it, and it was done before he won his Oscar. So I was waiting all movie. I'm like, I kept thinking, I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, I can't wait to see Brendan Fraser. I can't wait to see Brendan Fraser. It takes like fucking 3 hours to get to him.
Yeah, literally 3 hours.
Which is I have no problem with, but I was so excited to finally see him on screen. He killed it.
Also, Jesse Plemons, he was actually cast as the co-lead of Nope.
That's right. He was
then
going to
he
be
turned down
Stephen Yeun's character.
Yeah.
He was going to be a Nope, but he couldn't do it.
And then he turned it down to do this. I mean, you're not going to say no to Scorsese.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Jordan Peele understood.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure Jordan Peele was like, you should go do that.
I would probably do the same
Yeah.
thing, bro. Like, don't work on my movie. That's Martin Scorsese's greatest director ever.
Legit, yeah. I'm sure he didn't care.
But yeah, he would have been Stephen Yeun's character. Would have been Juniper's Claim character, and the childhood actor and everything. I think he would have been perfect for that role as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great actor.
But I mean, Jesse Plemons is great. He's a loved actor, man. Everyone loves Jesse Plemons.
Yeah, everybody loves him.
Because Breaking Bad is huge, obviously. But I mean,
He brings it, man.
He brings it.
He's got
Season
it.
3, 4, 5 of Breaking Bad. He's terrific.
He's got it, man. He's awesome.
I mean, what else you got in this movie?
That's everything.
I'm trying to think
Yeah.
because again, we just saw it last night, just once, and I'm trying to remember everything from it. But it's just the movie. The thing about this movie, there's so much of a mood and a feeling to it that I felt that you don't always feel with movies, where you're experiencing something special. It's a Martin Scorsese film. He hasn't made one since 2019, which is shocking. But he transports you like nobody else. He transports you into a world. He transports you into characters where the suspension of disbelief is completely gone. You accept everything you're seeing as reality. There's no mistakes in the movies he makes, and like you said, he's the best storyteller of all time. I mean, even all those cavemen back in 4000 BC, fuck them. They ain't got nothing on Martin Scorsese.
He would have been a great caveman sketcher.
Yeah, he would have been like the best
Everyone
one.
would be like, oh, sketch the scene,
Whoa,
man.
perfect mammoth. It's Martin Scorsese. yeah. So I'm from Brooklyn and I'm a caveman and everything. Where's he from?
He's from Little Italy.
Did you know that him and De Niro have known each other since they were 15?
Really?
Knew each other as teenagers. They fell out of touch. And then they got together when they were both even before Mean Streets, they made a short film. But they've known each other since they were teenagers. So I was reading this little interview with Martin where he's like, the only person who knows where I'm from that's in the industry is De Niro. Like,
Who's also from where he's
Robert
from,
knows
yeah.
like the community I'm from and where I grew up. But they were friends when they were teenagers. They fell out of touch for years, and then they got together for making movies and stuff. He didn't even know that Robert De Niro wanted to be an actor. And then obviously it happened. Then they made a short film, then they made Mean Streets.
Look at them now.
Look at them now, still making movies.
Still crushing it.
Freaking 65 years later.
Still making the best movies of the decade. Unreal.
I mean, this is one of the best movies of the decade. I will say that. Obviously, it's because it's the only movie Scorsese's made, so you have to.
He only makes great movies.
He's got to do it.
The guy's filmography is so fucking crazy that if you take just the 21st century films, he's an all-time director. Arguably the best. And then if you take just his you just take his 20th century movies, you could argue that he's the best director of all time.
2 Hall of Fame careers. 2 best ever careers.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
2 best ever careers.
And it's like, most people haven't even seen Hugo.
Most people haven't even seen Gangs of New York.
Most people haven't even seen The Color of Money. It's like, there's so many movies that are unbelievable that he's done that a lot of people...
Most people haven't seen Silence.
Yeah, haven't seen.
It's weird to say that there are some movies Martin Scorsese movies that are underrated and that deserve more appreciation. Silence is maybe the top of the list.
Oh, yeah.
Silence
Absolutely.
is an incredible movie. And it only came out 2016. And I think that might go down as like one of his best movies by the end of his career. It's aging very well. It's got a lot of hype on like film Twitter and film people. They really love Silence.
Good, because I fucking loved it. Nobody saw it.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I saw it twice in theaters.
But when it comes to personal films, it feels like Goodfellas, Silence, and Killers of the Flower Moon
Mean Streets
are his most personal films. And I think for him to put himself in this movie for 3 minutes and then with a couple audio cameos just proves that this is one of his most personal projects he's ever done.
And also, what makes him a really exceptional filmmaker is the ability to tell the stories of other cultures so well. Because in Kundun, Kundun is just I was they're not similar, but I was getting the feeling of translating a whole different culture onto screen with so much affection and so much respect. I can't think of other directors who can do it this way, where you're really feeling like the culture. It feels like the director's from that culture and community, but he's not.
Even something a little more seamless for him with The Departed and Irish Bostonians.
Yeah,
he's an Italian New Yorker telling a story about
the mafia are assholes in that movie.
He rips on Italians in that movie, and the Italians just stop having the mafia.
They never stop having the mafia.
What are you guys coming up here for some cannolis or something?
Yeah.
Like, he's an Italian New Yorker director, and he's making a great movie about Irish Bostonian culture. It's not too far from his life and his background, but it's different.
Yeah, I mean, I kept getting reminded of Kundun when I saw this.
Me
while
too.
I was watching
I was thinking
it.
the same thing.
Yeah.
He does have great respect for other cultures. He always has with his movies, and he's such a great storyteller where, we have so many conversations of like, you have to be a specific person to tell that story. Who would you want to tell the story other than Martin Scorsese?
Yeah.
I mean, who could have done it this well? And who could have done it with this much respect?
Nobody would have had the power to be able to get it done
exactly,
this way.
Yeah.
He's the only person that could have pulled it off. He's the only, and I'm not artistically, but also practically and business-wise.
You think Apple would have given $200 million to anyone else to make a movie about the Osage murders?
No way. But Martin Scorsese, and I'm sure, whatever Martin wanted, he got.
This is what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
He said, Apple's probably like, hey, what's your next movie going to be?
Yeah, so what happened was Paramount was originally going to produce and distribute the film when it was more of the investigative, when it was the original script. Because it was more of an action script, it was more of a investigative mystery script, and so it was more commercially viable for them. But then when they changed the script to be more character-driven, Paramount's like, yeah, we can't do this anymore. It's not going to work for us. Can you find something else? And
we'll distribute it for you.
They own the rights to the film, but they let DiCaprio and Scorsese option the film to other studios, and Apple is the one that bought it.
To Netflix and Apple's like, hey, Martin Scorsese, here's $200 million.
We want that prestige, bro. Get
prestige.
it over here. You think we care about money? We got the iPhone 15 coming out.
You know how many iPhones we sold last month?
See the fucking new billboard? Titanium. It's an iPhone, but it's titanium.
I saw this great mashup and compilations of all the presentations of the new iPhones. And they always have like the same lines, like, we've made the most beautiful and elegant iPhone of all time. It's always like the same two lines.
It always works, man.
It does. But I mean, who's
not on me?
Who's gonna give Martin Scorsese a $200 million budget to make a movie, whatever he wants to make? That's the one pro to a lot of these tech companies turn movie studios is they will give $200 million to Martin Scorsese to make the movie that he wants to make.
Yeah.
I love that. Whereas this movie probably would have never gotten made if it wasn't for studios like Apple.
Exactly. It wouldn't. Netflix might have maybe pulled it off, but I think Apple clearly gave him the sweeter deal. Man, what a movie! What a picture!
What a picture! You know who's been real quiet lately? The Martin Scorsese haters.
Oh, he only makes gangster movies.
No, the superhero thing.
Oh, the Marvel stands.
Yeah. It's because he hasn't had a movie come out in 4 years. I think that might be why.
And also, Marvel's tanking.
They are not having a good couple of years. But this is not a Marvel podcast. This is a Martin Scorsese podcast.
It's a film podcast.
No, this episode.
It basically is a Scorsese podcast. Yeah.
This episode is a Scorsese podcast. And that wraps our first episode on Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm sure we will touch on this movie sometime in the near future. It is sensational. We cannot recommend checking it out enough. I'm sure if you've listened to this whole episode, you've probably seen it, but I know some of y'all listen to the episodes even though you haven't seen the movies, which is fun. But we adored this movie. Cannot wait to check it out again. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. It means the world to us. Best way to support Raiders of the Lost podcast is to share us with your family and friends. Leave those 5-star ratings on Spotify and Apple. Support our short film Midnight Ruin, leaving those Letterboxd reviews and IMDb ratings. And for sure, become a patron at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost podcast. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in.
See you next time.
This episode was executive produced by our chosen one patrons, Cody Moen, Andrew Hagan, Becca Keene, Benjamin Cook, Calvin Murphy-Griggs, Nicholas Martin, Darian Singleton, Tyler McFly, Andrew Hagan. Our chosen one patrons are our biggest supporters. Thank you so much. Raiders of the Lost podcast is a mirror image production. Sound mixing done by Jacob Kossler. Opening music by Chase Jackson.